Hi, I'm Clarie from City Church, and I wanted to do a book review of the book called Global Humility Attitudes to Mission by Andy McCullough. Andy and Ben had a chat together during Sunday morning the other week, and Andy mentioned his book, and I thought it would be really helpful to share with you some of my thoughts about it. So, Andy's book looks at humility and looks at humility in a number of different areas. So he looks at being humble in the area of sin, so both our own attitudinal sins, but also when we encounter cross-cultural strongholds. He looks at having humility in our understanding of the world and of language and differences between ourselves and others. And he also applies the idea of humility to our thoughts about leadership and our thoughts about our theology. The book's really accessible. It's written in very clear language. The chapters are very concise, so you can get your head around them. It has good references, a great resource list. So if this is something like me that you have not really read into or know much about, I think it's a fantastic introductory text with lots of places to go and to explore further. His tone can be fairly challenging. It's quite forthright, provocative, potentially even to the edge of offensive. And running throughout the book is the theme of the powerless and the oppressed. I thought it might be helpful to give you two examples of two things which God used the book to speak to me about as kind of an example of what the book is like. So the first one was in its definition of sin. And Andy writes this. He says, we understand sin as both wickedness within us and calamity that comes upon us. And I found that really helpful, this idea that sin is both wickedness within and calamity that comes upon. And especially as I'm grappling constantly with the idea of mental health, how to be mentally healthy and how we understand that in a Christian context, I found that really helpful. And it's something that I'm going to be thinking a lot more about. The second example was when Andy is talking about language, and he talks about the story of the Tower of Babel. Now, whenever I've previously had teaching or read the story of Babel, I've always understood this as God's curse upon people to come down, to confuse their languages, and split the people up and spread them out. And Andy points out that actually from an alternative context, from the context of the powerless, this is a story of God's blessing upon the people, where he comes down and he delivers them back to their own languages and to their own tribe. And in line with his mission to fill the earth, he disperses the people and sends them out again. And it wasn't just that I'd never seen the story from that angle. It was that I hadn't even known there was another context to read that story from. And he writes, the position of the reader affects how they read. But the difference between the powerful and the powerless is this. The powerless know that their reading is context conditioned. The powerful often are oblivious. And I feel God used that to point out that as the powerful, I was oblivious to the fact that I read the Bible in an evangelical, 2020, educated, Western context. And that's quite humbling, and it's also quite challenging, because if I've missed the alternative context in that, how much else am I yet unaware of? And how much else do I need to listen to other people to find out? So I would like to be able to purely recommend this book to those people who've got a heart for cross-cultural mission. And I would absolutely do that. If you in any way want to church plant abroad, if you want to be reaching out into alternative and other cultures within our own city, absolutely I would recommend this book. I think it is going to become one of New Frontiers, almost textbooks on the subject, and a complete must read. So I would really advise you, wherever you can, get hold of a copy and read this and let God use this to speak to you. However, I don't think I can limit my recommendation to just those who want to serve cross-culturally. I found it had a lot to say to me in my own culture, in the estate on which I live, as I want to reach my neighbours, as I'm grappling with not being a racist in the light of George Floyd's death, as I'm part of a church that is wonderfully and deliberately opening its arms and its doors to the poor and the powerless within our own city. Being humble is absolutely key to that. So it's a challenge of a book, but it's an absolute recommendation from me. I managed to read it for free from Kindle Unlimited. Obviously, you can buy the book from loads of different places. If you can borrow it from someone, do so. But I would really recommend getting hold of it and giving yourself some hours. Wow.